Hello, so today I'll be presenting on why Sydcarmy must be canon. We'll see if I'll turn this into a YouTube video or something. This is just for fun, but like this is my project that I actually want to do. And the season 5 is coming out next week, June 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I want to finish this before we get the end of the show, allegedly. Okay, rough date estimate. Okay, here we go. Next slide. So I just want to start by giving a table of contents, what we're going to be talking about through this presentation. I'm also wearing my retainer, so don't mind if I sound a little off. Okay, so table of contents, we're going to start with the introduction, talking about just the story of the bear and why I'm going to be focusing on the two of them as characters. This is mostly them together, but they are very important characters individually as well, which is very important to know. We're going to talk about their different dynamics and how they change across seasons 1 through 4. Just a little interlude, we'll talk about thematic elements, parallels, gestures that they've given to each other, my potential ideals, or like what I would like to see happen in this final season. Another interlude for fun. We'll end with the conclusion, and then this will be like a pre-presentation. So basically, um, once the season 5 does come out, I'll probably add a slide talking about what I thought of the season and how that kind of compares to all the evidence that I've gathered here today. Okay, next slide. So for an introduction, I decided to just take this um, like synopsis from the Bear Wiki page. This is like from the Bear Wiki, not from Wikipedia, so it might be slightly different. It's a little more detailed. It says the Bear synopsis. You can read it for yourself, but basically it's about a young chef from the fine dining world. That's Carmen Berzotto. He comes to run his family's sandwich shop after the death of his brother, who passed away by suicide. He has to balance running this small business. It's called The Beef, where his parents used to own, trying to figure out how to integrate with this new kitchen staff that's more used to working in like a not as like fine dining environment, and then how they kind of come together to either like successfully run this restaurant or not successfully run this restaurant. And the goal, I really wanted to highlight this, is about his chosen family. So basically, Sydney Adamu, who's half of Sydcarmy, and Carmen Berzotto, the other half of Sydcarmy, are both chefs, and they're very highly competent in their field. Um, it talks about Carmen is technically the main character of the show, so he comes from a fine dining environment. Or he didn't run away, but he decided to escape his family and very much pursue the fine dining world. Sydney has also pursued the fine dining world, um, but I won't say not exactly to as high a level, but she's still very much established in her field and she's very successful. She also, in her past, ran a catering company, but it ended up getting too successful too quickly and she wasn't able to keep up with that. It's interesting to note that the series does start on Sydney's first day of work rather than Carmy's first day of work, which I think is very important to how integral Sydney is to the success of this restaurant. The beef first, and then later we'll talk about the bear. And then basically their partnership, whether as business partners, work colleagues, oh, I saw that wrong. Okay, other dynamics that we'll be discussing, is very like one of the most important relationships of the show because they are kind of the like leaders of this restaurant. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about their different dynamics over the courses of each season, season 1 through 4, with different scenes that I think are important in terms of their dynamics or important moments in terms of like the Sydcarmy lore. Okay, so season 1 is, I titled it, That's Fire Chef. That's like something that he says to her when he tries one of her dishes for the first time. So basically, it does start out with kind of a mentor-mentee relationship, but Carmy from the very beginning places like a lot of leadership in Sydney. It's interesting to note that he's I don't know how much aware of it he is, but I think he's at least to some extent because Sydney does like compliment him a lot, at least to people in their like kitchen staff environment. To say like he was the best CDC at the best restaurant in the world. Like he's very talented. Like she'll say stuff like that, and she seems like very impressed to find him in this new environment at this like rundown sandwich shop. But in this way, she is kind of a fangirl, but at the same time, she is very competent and she uses the skills that she's learned from catering to hopefully and try to implement ideas that will improve the business. For example, she creates this business plan that Carmy like looks over and realizes, yes, you're right. These are things that we should be changing in our restaurant for it to run better. It's interesting. I think it's episode, I can't remember the exact episode, but Carmi notes that we have to turn this place around. He's placing them in like a position of leadership together, even though he's technically like the boss still. So as I mentioned, it's like the two of them and then the rest of the kitchen staff. And the main like dynamic or question of this season is, are they able to collaborate or not? And is Sydney in a leadership position or is she not? There's some episodes that kind of tackle this conflict, and we'll be talking about that in the next slide. And they also kind of parallel each other in that in the first season at least, they're both acclimating to a new environment. Carmi has been away from his family in Chicago for a long time in the fine dining world. He actually just came back from an abusive not even mentor, boss, basically, in the fine dining world at Empire. They did change that, but okay, we'll say Empire. And so he's trying to acclimate to being back in the world where he technically grew up, where his mother was previously, or his dad a little bit, was previously running a restaurant. At the same time, Sydney is trying to acclimate to the beef, which she just joined, um, and sort of like she has like a little bit of a conflict adjusting, especially with the kitchen staff. We see that with Tina, um, and like a little bit Marcus, but he's a little bit more receptive to her like feedback and stuff. But yeah, they're both trying to acclimate to a new environment, and so we see this play out across season one. There's a couple moments that stand out. We'll talk about next, but by the end of the season, they do establish a found family. The description said like chosen family, including all the staff. But it's important to note that the heads are still Sydney and Carmy. There's this quote when Sydney quits. Spoiler alert. Oh, I should have given a spoiler warning for the whole show. But spoiler alert: Sydney um, quits the bear. There's like a big conflict where she forgot to turn the to-go option off on the pre-orders. So on this really busy day, she had just like secretly, not so secretly, promoted one of her own dishes, a risotto. That better come back too. This risotto, and they get like this major review, and so there's like an influx of orders, but they're not able to handle it because she forgets to turn off the pre-order button. Um, but anyway, so she quits. They kind of have an argument. They're like yelling, and then she quits, or he's more yelling at her really, but she quits saying like you're an excellent chef and you're also basically the worst. She leaves, but then he texts her like your last check is ready. You can come back to get it whenever. Carmi opened this like tomato can to finally make the spaghetti that he's been avoiding making all season, and turns out there's a bunch of money in it. So that's what you see in this image on the bottom. And basically, she walks back into the restaurant, sees all this tomato cans, all the splattering everywhere, and Carmi turns to her and says, "Family style, two tops, booths." So this statement means, would you like to create a restaurant with? It's kind of hard to understand, but he's saying like, I would like to create a restaurant with you, a family style restaurant. We'll be the two heads, the two tops, and we'll have booths. They talk about like windows on the side for sandwiches, and she agrees. Okay, what do we call it? So the idea is that they're now going to go on a new endeavor together. So a couple of season one scenes stand out. First, I have to say their first meeting, I consider it meet cute because it just, I don't know if you know the term meet cute in like romance novels and stuff. It's used as a term to describe the first time the romantic interests are meeting, and it has to be like in a cute way. Like it somehow it just seems like a rom-com moment basically. But anyway, what happens is he's going through her she like walks oh, there's like so much noise in the scene before that. It's a very chaotic environment. The kitchen is very chaotic. He's trying to gather money to be able to pay for meat for the day. And then the music stops and Sydney walks in. um he like stares at her. He's like, "Oh, hi." And she's like, "Hey, like I'm here because I was gonna stage," which is basically like test run for the restaurant. So he goes through her resume and he's like, "Oh wow, like these are some really cool places that you worked." And he's like, "What's UPS?" And I'm sure everybody knows what UPS is. UPS as in like United Postal Service. And she says like the mail. She's like, "Oh, right, right, right." So yes, I do. He's like, "I do know what UPS is," but in the moment he forgets. So like, if you forget like meeting someone and you forget what UPS is, that's like an indication to me that like you were distracted by something, you know. And then it's interesting also that he asked her like, "Why are you coming here?" And she's like, "Oh, like I used to come here every Sunday. It's like a special place. Like that's why I want to work at the Beef." We know, well, at the time we don't because it's the first episode, but we come to learn as an audience that the real reason she wants to work there, of course, is to work with him, into partnership with him. Um, but it's interesting because the Beef is actually not even open on Sundays. They're closed every Sunday. And if she actually worked, if she actually went there with her parent, with her dad, she mentions, then she would know that the restaurant's closed on Sundays. But in the end, he's like, "Oh, okay, cool. So you're hired." And then it's interesting dynamic that just like the first time they're meeting, he like notices that she lies, but she's still like, "Yes, I want to hire you." At the previous slide, I included an image of like them looking at each other, having a conversation. That was the alley conversation from the third episode of season three. They have a conflict because Carmi's trying to like implement this brigade system, and he's like, "You're gonna run it by. I'm leaving the restaurant." She's like, "No, I know this is not gonna work," but he's like, "No, it's gonna work by." Like he doesn't really take in consideration what she's saying. But then they have this really nice conversation where they're like talking back and forth, and you can tell they're actually receptive to what the other person's saying. And it ends with like Sydney saying, "Now I know that you know, like I know that you have heard what I said." And it's like this mutual understanding that is like I think important for their relationship, at least in season one, or that's like at least a good moment of their relationship. There is this like scene, it's interesting with the bear, like a lot of the music choices I think are intentional. And you can look at interviews like Christopher Storer, he's like the main creator, main director, he's an executive producer as well. He created the show, yeah. Um, so did another person, or I think there's another executive producer that I also really like, Joanna Callow, but um, yeah, anyway. So he mentions in like interviews like with the show, like I was very intentional about what music choices I made for the show. Like everything's very intentional, like you look for Easter eggs. And that's kind of why this whole thing started, because there's so much evidence if you look at the like intricate stuff, and then if you also look widely at the show. I'm probably talking too much. Anyway, so then basically there's this straining scene where like Sydney asks, or I don't know if Carmy asks or Sydney asks, but anyway, Sydney's trying to like strain something. She's like, "Can you help me?" I think she says, "Can you help me?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So he's like, she's like holding the strainer, and he's like holding the pot underneath her or something. And you hear this music that's like, "This is what love is for." I'm like, okay. I feel like there's a lot of moments like that. Like the music choices of the scenes just reflect that there's like something more than just a work partnership, question mark, question mark. And we'll continue to see that throughout the seasons. So of course there's the blow up of tension I mentioned earlier in the seventh episode where she's like, "You know what? You might be a really good chef, but you are not a good person, and for that I cannot work with you anymore. I've had enough." It's also a combination of like her buildup of animosity with other people in the restaurant, namely Richie, which is kind of interesting seeing where they end up later on in the seasons. But yeah, it's like I cannot be partners with someone that doesn't actually respect me. So she leaves. But then the next episode, she's gone. It's a little longer of an episode, but we do get a lot of like interesting moments about their lore. For example, episode 8 or the finale, season 1, is the first mention of the best meal I've ever had. Sydney's in a conversation with Marcus, and after like kind of skirting around it, she actually reveals that it was Carmy's dish. She like spent a bunch of money going to a lot of places when she was really like she just finished um culinary school. She goes to a bunch of places, like maxed out her credit card, and the last place she went, she said, was the best meal she ever had, and it was Carmi's. So that also kind of puts into perspective maybe she came to the restaurant for another reason in addition to wanting to work at a dying sandwich shop. Another interesting part about this episode 8 of season 1, is that Carmen does think a lot about Sydney during this episode when she's not present. For example, he says, "You're just like Sid" to Sydney to Tina after she wears the apron that they all wear in the restaurant. So it's interesting. He he like connects the apron as like a form of like professionalism that Sydney has implemented, and he's like, "You just like Sid." Additionally, um, Sydney had left her little notebook, which had all her different recipes, including the risotto, in it. And there's like a scene of him like looking over and like looking through the pages and seeing like, oh, this is Sydney's, like this is her notebook. Like looking at the recipe, being like, oh, Coke risotto, okay. And then I think a really important moment is that he actually texts her at like a really interesting moment in the show. So the show was about Carmy and kind of his journey of dealing with grief, specifically because his brother died by suicide and kind of gave the restaurant to him as like his inheritance. So at the end of the season, Richie, who's his like cousin, friend, family friend basically, um, gives him this letter and says this is actually from Michael. This is from Mikey. I was afraid, I didn't know to give it to you earlier. I was afraid like what that would mean, but I'm giving it to you now. And right before Carmi, he's like he's not freaking out, but he seems like a little tense about it. Right before he goes to open that letter, he texts Sydney. And it was a really interesting moment because you you're not expecting Carmi to text Sydney unless but yeah, so basically he texts Sydney and is like, my behavior was not okay. It's like he's basically apologizing for yelling at her the day before. It's like I'm gonna say it was the day before. It's not entirely clear on the timeline, but like at least a couple days before, whatever. And that his behavior was not okay, and that she can come back by to get the last check. And then, of course, we see her coming back to the restaurant, where I just described the scene where she comes back, sees all the tomato cans. That's like the top left image you see on the screen, and she kind of looks at him, and they agree to translate from the beef to the bear, the restaurant. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into what I think is like a really nice season of The Bear, probably my favorite season. And it's cool because you kind of do get to see their dynamic in a slightly different way. Sorry for the bad quality of photos, but I tried my best. So anyway, season 2, or is going to be titled "You Make Me Better at This," because that's a very nice quote from one of their scenes. The scene, if you might say. Okay, so in this season, Sydney is the CDC septic cuisine, and then Carmy is the head chef. But it's kind of like an interesting period because it's an interim between the beef and the bear. It takes place over 3 months leading up to the bear opening, or the opening of the restaurant The Bear. It's about the creation process of may opening a new restaurant or changing from a sandwich shop to a fine dining restaurant. There's like this tension throughout the season of if they are able to be partners, if you can trust your partner, and what Sydney's role is in the restaurant, which is kind of like a continuation of season one, but in this case, it's more about her gaining leadership and even maybe being equal to Carmy, potentially, because she does end up taking over a lot of the tasks that Carmy is supposed to do. And there's the question of if she needs Carmy to create and run the restaurant. I think the arc of the season is kind of, or their arc as Sydcarmy, or them together, is described as like a period of closeness, then separation or unalignment, and then coming back together at the end. And it's kind of divided by these three sections, I would say, in terms of episode numbers. There is also the start of the question of if Carmy enjoys even working at a restaurant or if she enjoys cooking at all. And if it's possible to like find amusement, enjoyment in your work or outside of work, and if that's kind of like the key to having a good like balance or mental health journey. It's interesting that, but in season one, when people started like shipping, I guess, or finding, like, thinking that these two characters could be together, or maybe there's a romantic spark, like the authors were immediately like, no, no, there's no romance. The Bear is not a show about romance. Except for Joanna Callow, who said that she originally wanted Sid Carmy to like hook up, I'll say. And then Christopher Starr was like, no, 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 we're not doing that. We're not doing that. It's a partnership. Which is, I happy with him for many reasons, but okay, Christopher. Anyway, so then after season one, saying no, there's no romance in the show. This is not a show about romance, about found family. We do introduce romance in season two. And that specific, the like explicit romance is through the character of Claire, which we'll talk about a little bit only in the context of her and Sydney's parallels. I'm sorry, I did not include a picture of her in my slides. This is my presentation. I decided. But if you want, you can look them up. I don't ship Claire and Carmy. That's whatever. Okay, next. That's just a whole other thing. I think it's interesting. You can look at like other qualities of their relationship, but we're focusing on Sid Carmy for this video. Okay, anyway, so basically throughout the season there's this thin line between being friends and maybe being something more than friends, and we'll discuss this through specific episodes. And it's also there's this like awareness or closeness between them that they start to acknowledge. There are like a lot of instances. I didn't include them in my episode like standout episode list, but there's like a lot of instances of them kind of like learning how to read each other. Um, for example, like the introduction of the sorry sign, or like this scene down here where they're like fixing the restaurant, like you should have Sydney's like you should have called me. Um and he's like, oh, like, okay, yeah, I'll call you next time. Like they're like there's like a tension between the characters, which because they're kind of realizing they need to work together, but like aren't necessarily ready to, I guess. Um, yeah, it's like interesting tension. And then I will say this is probably the closest. Some of the moments in the season are so good that I think it's the closest to Sid Carmy bliss that we'll ever get throughout the seasons, or at least so far. I don't know what's gonna happen in season five. So, there are some standout scenes in this season. Again, maybe why this season is my favorite. This season also is like best in terms of like episodes. There's a lot of standout episodes in this season, just as season two as a whole, but all specifically for Sydcarmy. So for example, there's like episode one, um, like they realize that in order to make the restaurant, they do have to do a lot of work, or they have to fix the restaurant a lot. So they're not able to actually do anything in the present day. Everybody decides to go home, and as they're leaving, they're like the last two to leave the restaurant, Sydney and Carmy. they're kind of like standing there awkwardly, and so like Carmy asks like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" And she's like, I don't know." Like she's like, "What are you gonna do?" Like they're like, I don't know. They just like stare at each other kind of awkwardly, and like you can tell that maybe they want to hang out outside of work, but they've never done that before. So it doesn't, and nothing ends up happening. But it's kind of interesting, like, to see that the awkwardness in their dynamic. Maybe we should try to, like, be friends outside of just work colleagues. That's an interesting dynamic. And then you can do research for yourself, but, like, during that scene, there's some lyrics playing. Again, you talk about music being very important to the show. I don't have the exact lyrics right now with me, but it's something like, me staring at the floor looking at your shoes or something, as like Carmi is like looking down at her shoes in the scene. So like there's a lot of instances like that where just like, is this, if this is intentional, what are we trying to say here? Like this is clearly like a love song about being nervous to ask out someone, so why are we putting that in the scene? Christopher Store. Okay, then we have episode 2 of season 2, where they do start to vibrantly collaborate. That's going to be a term that shows up later because Carmi does not like vibrant collaboration, but in season 2, they really get it. Like, they're more aligned, and they kind of like decide to collaborate and figure out what their menu for this new restaurant will be. This is also, that's kind of in the bottom scene if you look at the second picture I included, um, like the bottom left corner. And it's an introduction of the sorry sign, which is like in ASL, they learn how to say sorry. Carmi's like, two of my old chefs used to do it. Um, and it was like their way of saying, like, let's talk about this later. Um, which is interesting because they don't really implement it like that, but he includes a sign which shows like another like hidden language that the two of them share. Um, it's also interesting that this episode is when Carney looks up the definition of happiness, or he's like, I tried to look up what's the definition of happy, and he's like something that brings you amusement and enjoyment. So it's interesting, he like is trying to find that outside of the work environment, and the implication is that maybe hanging out with Sydney will bring him that. But of course, we see the introduction of Claire right after that, so it's interesting placement anyway in the lore of the show. I did include that the sorry sign is later confused for I love you because in season 4 there's like a moment where like Sweeps uses the sorry sign like circle around your heart, and Carmi's like and Sweeps is like, I thought that meant I love you, and then Richie's like, no, there's no I love you in the restaurant. And I'm like, okay, the only two people that use that sign are Sydney and Carmy, so what are you trying to say? There's a lot of that in the show, which is whatever, but not whatever, basically. Okay, so episode 3 of season 2, Carmi cancels their food date. I'm calling it a food date, but it's not. It's their food tour to like visit restaurants and try their different menus. Um, and there's this conversation again of trust. Like, can you trust your partner? They mention first Sydney's dad mentions this in episode 2 of season 2, but then as Sydney ends up going on her food tour by herself, there's like a lot of her previous work colleagues and bosses and stuff saying you need to have a good partner, someone you can trust. So it's like the idea of, can they trust each other? Can Carmen and Sydney trust each other? There's this moment in episode 5 of season 2 when Claire, who is like Carmi's technical love interest of the season, comes to the restaurant to like meet everyone, I guess. Carmi's like, do you want to see the restaurant? And people are still there because they're actually trying to work, and Carmi's being very avoidant of his work, which is, of course, part of his mental health journey he takes in the show. But it's interesting he like avoids like talking to Sydney a lot throughout the season until they become aligned. That's like the misalignments portion of the season. So For this episode's, it's not start, but like somewhere in the middle, Sydney's like, I need Carmy, like I need to be working on the napkins and the plates with him, but he's off being Carmy somewhere. And then Natalie, who is Carmy's sister, is like, um, he's hanging out with Claire. At least he's hanging out with Claire, or at least he's with Claire. And Sydney has a moment where she's like, who's Claire? Like she seems kind of like judgmental. She's like, who is this new girl? Who is this? But so then when Claire comes and meets the family, she's like, hey, I'm Sydney. I'm also sorry that you're here. And that's kind of interesting because like this is the first time we've seen Sydney have like any type of reaction to someone and to say like I'm sorry that you're here. It's like kind of like a Freudian slip kind of thing, but it shows you that she might not be feeling Claire basically. Okay, so then we have episode 8 of season 2 where the Claire is like a fixture of this season. And Sydney says you need to decide. And first, when I first heard that line, I was like, you need to decide what we are. It's kind of confusing. But she says you need to decide whether Claire is a girl that's a friend or your girlfriend. And it's interesting that they place Sydney in like a role of like I'm your business partner. Like I need you to decide in terms of us moving forward, but also like as someone that has been around you a lot of times. Maybe it's coming from a place of jealousy, maybe not, but you also just need to clarify that because I am also a girl. Girl to friend, I don't know. And there's also this montage, which I'll be talking about later. Um, but right after that, as immediately after, Sydney's like, you need to decide when this is your girl that's a friend or your girlfriend. Then Carmy says, I have to call my girlfriend. So it's like Sydney is the switch that makes him decide to commit to Claire, at least for the next, not even 2 episodes, not really. We're going to talk about episode 9 of season 2, which is T. It's just T. But then there's the Friends of Family Service of um of episode 10 of season 2, where this like a one instance of Sydney saying to Carmy, "You need to calm down." We'll see this dynamic a lot, like of calming each other down. We'll talk about that later, but it is this moment of like, if we're gonna be partners, unlike season 1 when you were yelling at me, we cannot have that happen again. We cannot have that happen again. So she like says you need to calm down, and he does, which is period. But then he gets locked in the fridge, which is a whole thing. It's like a big moment of the season, at the end of the season. And it's very subtle, so I'm glad that I found this out. But as soon as he gets locked in the fridge, he like yells like get Sid, get Sid, get Sid. Like if you listen, if you hear like the background, you'll notice that part. But yeah, so he says like get Sydney. Like well, he says get Sid. But he's like wanting to seek her out in this moment of like panic. Like I'm locked in this fridge. What's my immediate reaction? I need to be able to talk to Sydney. I need to like reassure her or like get this situation fixed and I know she can help me with this. So again, it's like showing their closeness and like how they are actually reliant on each other. So I think I'm gonna pause here. Um, yeah, we're gonna do part 2 because it's already like 33 minutes and I'm like not even close to being done. Okay, bye for now. Thank you for listening.